We are here with our guest, Dr. Story Musgrave, NASA astronaut, and he's done so much more in his life. An amazing military career and holds 7 degrees, far more than any other person I know. I have 4 post high school degrees, one doctorate, of course, but nothing near as this amazing man himself. Dr. Musgrave, it is a pleasure to have you on the show.
Okay, Dr. J.
Well, first I gotta say we had contact in the desert on end of May, early June, first day of June. We were on the disclosure panel, an all-star panel with former Congressman Merrill Cook, you of course, Richard Dolan, Linda Moulton Howe, Donald Schmidt, and and of course Stephen Bassett. And you brought up some amazing points. First of all, just because we can't do something doesn't mean that something that has 100,000 years ahead of us, or a million years, or even a billion years ahead of us, can't. And it doesn't mean that we can't do it. Doesn't mean that they can do it. And you brought up that point, and I was hoping we could expand on that a little bit.
Well, sure. Like now?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I mean that's pretty simple thinking. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. If a planet gets its act together, which is a serious question, some planets don't get their act together. That is the advanced evolutionary string. But we've been developing technology. You might say it began at the Italian Renaissance or the Industrial Revolution, but basically 300-400 years. Now, if a planet's got its act together and it's been developing technology for a billion years, that's an incredibly advanced technology, especially if the evolutionary string has created at the same time extraordinary intelligence, then you have an opportunity to have advanced, just unbelievable, unimaginable technologies. So that is one aspect, and that means people are doing interstellar travel. And so, and of course, the other thing is that life is so powerful it arises or is transported everywhere. So life is everywhere in the universe, and you have massively advanced technology. So that's it.
Exactly. And I'm so glad you mentioned that point, because a lot of people think that just because we can't do it, it means that our laws of physics, our current understanding of physics is the maximum. But see, that's not true, because 150 years ago, if you talked about flying in the sky, people would think you're crazy unless you were in a hot air balloon.
Sure.
If you talked about a man on the moon, you were locked in a loony bin. But here we are, about to celebrate, the 50th anniversary in less than 4 years, about for the first man on the moon, Apollo 11. And so obviously, I just can't imagine where we're going to be 300 years, 500 years, 1,000 years down the line.
Yeah, if the planet gets its act together.
And thank you for mentioning that. I'm actually hoping briefly we can go into that realm, because we have been seriously damaging this. We've been using fossil fuels
Oh,
when
well, we
we
have,
should be.
yes, we have. So sustainability is one issue. The other is if the species cannot get along with itself, there is going to be no progress. There's 50 wars this week.
That's the saddest part. The fact that we are such a primitive tribe, or
Yes,
primitive
we are. We're very
species.
tribalistic, yes. We've not gotten over that.
Exactly. And I would think that when we get to that level and we are actually visiting other planets that may have civilizations on them, are we going to treat them the way that Christopher Columbus treated the Native Americans, or
Yes,
every other culture that's
of course.
treated?
Of course, and this idea is we need to get ready to leave because when it's destroyed this place, we'll need a new place to go to. And that does not work because if you don't get your act together here, you're going to take all your same problems there, and the same thing will happen.
Exactly, especially if the ruining the planet part, the pollution, the using the fossil fuels, and so much more. I think it's a matter of the greed
Yes,
of the humankind.
but the tribalism too. So if you're going to go and visit another place and there is life there, then you need to not go there or be massively careful on going there. You are a guest there. And I don't care,
Yes.
even if they're microorganisms, that's their place, not ours. So you
Exactly. And a lot
get
of people.
down to, yeah, Dr. J, you get down to, it's the same issue of on this planet when one culture meets another. Well, you go somewhere. Now, I was on a panel on this whole thing, and I raised the ethical issue of going to another planet. And I says, if there's any life there at all, it does become an issue. And is it ethical to go there? Is it ethical to terraform? It's not ethical to terraform if life is there already. And somebody challenged me, and I brought up the cultural aspects, and just as you did, the coming of Europe to North America. And this person said, well, what was wrong with that? Look at what happened. Well, my
That's
goodness,
terrible. Look
that's
what happened. We
terrible.
killed everybody.
Look what happened. It's terrible, yes. So, but that same issue, I think, is there if there's life, if there's any possibility of life on the planet we intend to go to.
Now, I'm going to go back to your career. First of all, you had an outstanding military career. Then you were involved with NASA for several years. You did several manned missions from 79 to 82, I believe, on the space shuttle, right?
Yes, I was back up on the first Skylab back in 1973. Well, I was signed to back up in 71. That was our first space station. So that was my first mission.
Do you want to talk about Skylab? Because the fact that it was our first space station is super important for humankind, considering how far we've evolved with the ISS.
Yeah, it's a lost program, but it did. The Congress would not allow us to do a different program until they wanted to keep our focus on the moon. But we built a Skylab out of Apollo materials. So we actually lived in the hydrogen tank at the third stage. Now that's where our space station was. We added a bunch of solar panels, a bunch of telescopes to that, put them under a protective cover, and launched it on a Saturn V. But a Skylab, we had a 2-week Gemini mission. That was the largest, human mission, including the Russians, and we just kept doubling that. So Skylab 1, we were out there for a month. Skylab 2, 2 months, and Skylab 3, 3 months. And so that was setting the record for how long people have been out there. And we had 200 experiments on board the space station. And they went with. It was more powerful in a way than the ISS today because we launched 200 experiments along with the lab.
Let me ask you about space travel in general. Obviously, so many people have a dream. You're a skydiver as well. I've have a B license, 128 jumps myself, and I love to jump because to me it is the truest feeling of flying. Of course, second to being a pilot in an airplane. But obviously, my dream would be to be in space. What did it feel like when you left the Earth's atmosphere and started to feel weightlessness and the loss of gravity?
Well, you feel that free fall condition instantly, and the engines do throttle down to 65% before shutdown, but that's very fast, and so you actually get thrown into zero gravity. But of course, it's not zero gravity; it's the free fall condition. NASA kind of created a misnomer there when they called it zero gravity, but it feels like zero gravity. It feels like it. But it's really free fall. You're in free fall condition. But you get tossed into it, so you get tossed into it rather fast. And you just get very, very light. Your arms float up. Your checklists are on chains. Your checklists are on, they're hanging on the strings during launch, of course. A double set of strings. If you lose your checklist, you're crossed off and you're out of the launch game. But they just come. They lighten up and they unfold like a peacock's tail. Each checklist unfolds, so the whole thing gets very light. It gets instant. You get thrown into zero G, so it's rather sudden.
Now, I'm going to ask this to you because you're a skydiver and we can actually relate to this. A lot of people have the misnomer that when you leave the airplane, you're going to get this roller coaster type feeling, which I try to explain to them is not necessarily true. Yes, you get that feeling until you reach terminal velocity, But people forget that you're traveling at 120 miles an hour
Yeah, so
horizontally.
you're not zero then. It's one
Exactly.
half rho v squared. So you may be, as you've just pointed out, Dr. J. It depends upon the speed that the airplane. The airplane would like to be very slow to get you out the door, but they're not that slow. They're still 70 miles an hour. So you're probably somewhere between a half and 2/3 of a G when you leave the airplane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And obviously that's extremely different than when you're in space, like you said, where you're literally thrown into it immediately because you don't have the relative wind
Yeah.
or anything like that.
But my own subjective, even though I know the physics, my own subjectivity, when I leave the airplane, I really feel like I'm falling, even though I'm not.
Yes.
In physics, I know I'm not. But my subjective feeling is when I leave the airplane, unless it's a helicopter, of course, then you are, in fact, you do get some real fall if you just step off a helicopter. But my subjective feeling is that I am kind of free falling.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned the helicopter because same thing with hot air balloon jumps and even base jumps.
Yeah.
There you're actually jumping from a
Well,
fixed point
don't
as
mention
opposed to a
base
moving
jumps.
plane.
I ain't into that game.
I'm not either, but I compare it because,
No,
of
sir.
course,
If I got
yeah.
I need to have
Yeah, I think it's too low for
the
me.
full capability of a reserve, and I don't want to be anywhere near an object. I don't
Thank you.
like risk.
My hard deck is 3,000
I
feet.
don't
Some people
like
go to
risk.
2,000.
Well, our
Yes.
standard year, that's where you pull the ripcord?
And my main 3,000, 3,500,
Yeah,
3.
well,
That
I
way.
did it too. I followed
Ah,
the book, but the book, I took it up, when the sport just came from France. So this was 1962. I took a sport up. And so I did it per the rules. The rules were 2,000 back then. Maybe they've gotten more conservative.
actually, no, you're dead on. For D license, people such as accomplished as yourself after 500 jumps. D license up until 15 years ago was 250 jumps. But the point being is, or maybe it was 300, whatever it is 2,000 is the hard deck
But
that
yes, back then
instructors
we
in
all
D tech.
did it. If you didn't have a license at all, if you were static line or free fall, 2,000 was the fixed number for everybody. But it may have changed for the better.
When was your last skydive?
I don't know.
Ah, well, back to
But a
the
while
question.
back,
I'm going to ask you one question about space, and then I know Johnny's got an amazing question. Now, Edgar Mitchell, we've had him on the show several times, and he said that when he was on the moon and he looked at the Earth, which would have been in the moon's position when looking from Earth to the moon, he felt that his job was completed from his NASA moonwalk. But on the way home, he seeing the planets and seeing how small we really are compared to our solar system, and then going beyond into other solar systems in our galaxy. And then when you think about the other galaxies, so many of them, that we really are such a small thing. Did you get some sort of feeling like that when you were in space?
I know I didn't. Of course, I was in Earth orbit, and Earth is massive.
Johnny, go ahead. You got a
Earth is
question.
absolutely massive.
It is. It truly
Right in
is.
the
And
face,
that's
yeah.
that's the scary part, because when you compare Earth to places like Jupiter, it's tiny, but yet we are on this world which is literally massive, and,
Uh,
and that's the
yeah,
that
my favorite
just shows
picture, of
up.
course, is either the Cassini one that shows Earth, a tiny little dot in right around 10 o'clock in the second to last ring of Saturn, or the Voyager. There's a Voyager picture of Earth in 3.7 billion miles, and I think those are the defining photographs that says who we are.
Mr.
Hi,
Musgrave, it's Johnny
sweetie.
Webb in London, and I have a couple of questions for
Hi.
you. One was the Black Knight
That's my
satellite.
daughter. That's my
And good
nine-year-old
evening.
daughter.
But yeah, my question was regarding the Black Knight satellite that seems to be very popular on the internet today. Um, I know NASA has a few of their own pictures that do show that particular piece of space junk or whatever people want to call it. But I wondered if you had an opinion on that yourself, sir.
I'll have to Google it because I don't know what that is.
Fair
It's
enough.
called Black Knight Satellite.
That's right. It's a piece of debris that's up there in space. Apparently, it's been there for quite some time. I even
Yes.
read that Nikola Tesla at some time in the late 1900s had made some kind of contact with it. I don't really know too much detail of that.
No, I don't know
Uh,
anything about it, but there are assets that'll give you a hard look at it, and that was a hard point I made at contacting the desert. So you need to call on the people on Maui, the Haleakala people, and
yeah,
you need to call the people got assets. If I'm doing a spacewalk and I lose a wrench, they can tell me where it is. So
sure.
those are the kind of people. When it comes to, do you want to know about a piece of debris? You want to know about a satellite? You want to know its history? You want to have a good look at it? Those are the people to call. You call them and say, could you look at this, please?
In 1970s in England on a British TV station called HTV, it showed a documentary, a science documentary, in fact, called Science Today. And what it talked about was a program in America, a joint venture between Russia and America, using the space shuttle. And at the time, this was before the space shuttle was really general public knowledge, and it was called Alternative Free. And my understanding was it discussed the possibility of the human race having to leave the planet due to a major meteor strike or something. I wondered, do you know about this? And obviously today we do have a joint venture with Russia. Could you enlighten us on any of that, sir?
1970 something, huh? I
Yeah,
guess
the
I don't know the
documentary.
question about the humanity leaving the planet.
Yes, it was a joint
Oh,
venture with Russia and America called Alternative Free.
so you send genetic material, human genetic material, somewhere else?
No, it wasn't discussing that. It was talking about the joint venture of America and Russia using the space shuttle. But at the time, this space shuttle hadn't even come into public domain. I think it was in the early 80s. And
Well, no,
so
the
what it,
space shuttle was exceedingly well known and configured, and the public knew what it was in 1972.
Let me ask you about space itself. First of all, the moon missions. Of course, we were there in the 70s. 69 and 69 is when we first got
Yeah,
there,
we
and then of
flew
course
that
we had,
till December of 72.
and then of course we stopped, and now we're coming on, like I said, 45-year anniversary, coming up to the 50-year and 4 years 46th anniversary. The point being is, as you know, China sent a probe there, and they're preparing for a mission to the moon. Why do you think we personally, as United States, stopped going to the moon? And do you think that China going, being an adversary of sort, may have other plans to maybe top us in the sense of maybe trying to build a base there, or to have a better space program than us? What's your speculation on China
On
and
the
the moon?
purpose of space is not, want to be in the absolutely not international competition. That should not drive it. Space is for exploration. It's for history. It's for philosophy. It's for romance. It is not and never was for international competition. So that's not why you do space flight. So I certainly wish them incredible well on the journey. It's their opportunity. It's their time to be going and doing those things. We had a massively successful moon program. We brought back. Of course, we only missed on Apollo 13. We flew 11, landed 11 through 17. Missed on 13, of course. But we brought back roughly 1,000 pounds of lunar material from scientifically some very exciting different places. So in a way, we completed the moon program. We completed exploration. And Skylab was a very useful thing to certify and qualify people for longer. But after that, we really should have looked into, gotten a vision for going further out. Just
Now,
a second. Just a second.
sure. We got to remember to cut this out, Johnny.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm so glad you brought up the fact that all of space is for mankind, because it needs to be. We need to explore this as humanity. There shouldn't be competition in general. We are one species, brothers and sisters, and that's why it bothers me when we have this tribal warfare.
Sure, and I think on the way to the moon, we would have gone so much faster if we'd said, hey, the two of us, The two of us are on this playing field together. We're going to help you get there. We don't care whether you get there before us. See, you could have used space. Now, of course, Apollo Soyuz test project that we flew in 75 was the beginning. And there we saw that collaboration in space was an incredible tool for helping us to get along.
The Mars missions that we're planning, obviously it's going to take, they estimate 6 months to get there, and then of course we're going to have supplies and the ability to create oxygen if there's water there or whatever they're planning. That's years in the run, and of course they're planning that now, and the astronauts that are going to go have committed to possibly not coming back. What advice would you give to them, being a seasoned astronaut yourself?
First of all, there is no Mars program. It does not exist, and there is none. And so, you can talk about that as people talk about it, and NASA wants you to think there is one. What is the fact? In 2015 and 2016, there is not one congressional dollar dedicated to Mars, period. Not $1 is in the NASA budget to go to Mars.
So what is the Mars Global Surveyor?
Sir, to go to an asteroid, and there isn't $1 to return to the moon. So we are not doing that program, and we need to fess up to the fact there is no program. And if there isn't $1, there is no program.
I'm really glad you brought up the fact of the congressional spending because, first of all, we have had severe cuts in NASA after the Apollo missions. Of course, there was funding when you were an astronaut and through the space shuttle missions, but now we're turning to these private companies because NASA funding has been cut even more.
Except
Do you think
NASA is funding the private companies now?
That is something I'm glad you told
billions.
me. Can you tell me, what do you think? This is again pure speculation. Is the private exploration of space a good thing? I mean, I think it is good for mankind for us to be able to see it, and instead of having to be vetted to qualify for a program. But at the same time, there's personal agendas involved in the sense such as Robert Bigelow built his own private space station. Now, whether he intends on using it for us or for him to have a place to hang out, I don't know. But that's one thing that worries me is, are they doing things for all of mankind or for their own interests?
The private people, they want to be in the sandbox. They got enough billions, and what are they going to do with their money? Well, they want to play in space. It's a nice sandbox to play in. And it's fine. So some entrepreneurial efforts can come out. Some new stuff can come out. But they want government money to do their thing. But we are developing today 6 different ways to get to low Earth orbit. That's the space station. Do we need to be paying for 6 different ways? I don't know. So what we really need is for NASA, along with the public, to come up with a long-range vision for where we're going. And there is zero vision today, and NASA doesn't want to do a vision. They think where the money comes from should tell them what they're going to do. Well, it's not. They are not visionaries. You need to have visionary people give a credible vision to the public and ask the public to tell Washington to please do this. So you need a big long-term vision, and then you select the best people to do the job. If it's what we call private companies, that's terrific. If they got the best thing to offer and you're the most confident that they will be on cost, on schedule, per specification, then you select them. But we need that total long-term vision. Now, I do want to mention, without the vision, the cost of the International Space Station is 300 Voyager satellites. The Voyager satellites are the total champions of exploration of the solar system. They have been out there for 35, 36 years now. They have departed. They have left the solar system after visiting 4 planets. They are still totally functional after 36 years. If another alternative, the cost of space station is we could have had 300 Voyagers out there. We could have had landers not only on every single planet, on every moon of every planet, and return samples from every planet for the cost of space station.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because, first of all, the Voyager mission that is finally reaching the end of our solar system and going beyond is one major thing for a major boost for mankind because we're able to see further than ever before. And again, having 600 Voyager missions that could have gone to Europa or other places that are speculated to have microbes or anything along the lines of that is so utterly important that it boggles my mind to know that we overlook that.
Yes, so it's the reach. It's a vision, and it's further out. So we had no vision. It's a jobs program.
Johnny had a question. Go ahead, Johnny.
Do you think the vision of NASA is the same as when you joined NASA, in your early days?
No. So we gave up creating a vision a long time ago in the early 70s. And so it was a difficult time in terms of creating a vision because we thought spaceflight was to compete in a ball game. And we won the ball game hands down, so everyone said, let's go home. We've won the game, the World Series is over, let's go home. And so some people said we're still going to have a space program. We didn't know we were going to have a space program other than international competition. So it was a little difficult. But we started giving up the vision to Washington at that time instead of visionaries that know science fiction, that dream, and that know what the alternative possibilities are, and who know what will excite the public the most.
That's what we need for mankind.
Yes.
We need visionaries to step forward, not
But it's
it's being
exploration.
boggled up
It's
with Congress.
exploration. That's what it's all about. What kind of universe? And it gets down to the humans always look to the heavens for the meaning of the hope of the life that they got here.
Dr. Musgrave, what do you make of the new secret space shuttles that are going up? Are they in the interest of America, in protections of Americans, or are they,
Yeah. Well, I
what's
don't
your
know,
take on
but
that?
they inherited that one. What is it? The X-37?
Yeah.
They inherited that from NASA, of course, because NASA had a whole bunch of X programs that never went anywhere. It's called X30, X32, X33, X34, 37, 38. Those are all aborted programs which did not have a solid vision and did not have solid project management. So we spent $1 billion or $2 billion on each one of them and swept them under the carpet.
A lot of people speak about the presidents, and of course, there have been a lot of presidents that have been pro NASA, a lot of that have not been as fond of space exploration. Kennedy seems to be the name that comes up, has done more for our space exploration than anybody else. Would you agree? And if so, what would you have to say about Kennedy and other presidents with their policies on
Yeah,
exploration?
he said go. He said go. He simply said go. That's all. But so, of course, Sputnik, Sputnik woke up the world and woke up the U.S. It should not have been that way. It should not have been that way at all. When von Braun came to this country, we did not allow the man to do spaceflight. He and 118 of the best rocket people in the world, and I keep up with the remaining four. There's four left, and I keep up with them. But he had incredible vision and a dreamer and wanted spaceflight. And, of course, the Germans didn't want him to do spaceflight. They wanted him doing weapons. When he came to this country, he couldn't do spaceflight either. He's still working weapons. A conservative estimate is if we'd asked the man and a little bit of funds, he would have orbited something in 1950, just 5 years after getting to this country. Very, very conservative. When we finally asked him to, for golly sakes, orbit something, it took him 3 months. So we'd have been 7 years ahead of Sputnik. It wasn't that they were ahead. It's that what is your vision? It always gets down to vision. So you looked at spaceflight. You looked at spaceflight as international competition. You looked at it weaponry. You looked at this or that diplomacy, but you didn't give it what it really is, called exploration, history, and romance.
Exactly. The main word exploration
Yes.
and the secondary word is visionary because they both go hand in hand and are important for literally the final frontier. One thing, this is an ethical area that I'm sure you'll agree on. When they were talking about weaponizing space and sending up nukes to space, I thought that was just extremely bizarre because, first of all, we didn't know what homes were out there for other beings. Like you said, what if we go terraform a planet or a moon that has microbes on it? We're destroying their home. Yet all of a sudden, the Russians and we were even talking about sending nuclear weapons and even having a weaponized base on the moon.
Yes.
I thought that is just wrong and unethical. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, we did and still do have a treaty, no weapons